Alright, we just got back from seeing Sherlock Holmes, A Game of Shadows. There's games in it, you know.
Shadows.
Shadowy ones. There were, in fact, many shadowy games that were going on in this, as if we didn't quite get the title. But, I think, okay, I have to go into this saying that Sherlock Holmes was one of my favorite movies of whatever year it came out, either last year or the year before. It really was that good, and I came into that one, I probably could not have gone in with a worse attitude, so I was really surprised by that one. It really is one of my favorite movies now. I love the original Guy Ritchie Sherlock Holmes. So I was really looking forward to this one, and very disappointed actually. I was hearing negative reviews, very negative ones. Yeah, go ahead.
I thought this movie was the same as the first, although in true sequel fashion, all the elements from the first one were cranked up to 11.
Yeah, it kind of had to be bigger and more explosionier and lots more guns and stuff like that. And I really think...
Not just explosions, but like, it was sillier.
Yeah.
Like, not only, like in the first one they had the bromance going on, but in this one they're just all out. You know, they're one step short of whipping out their cocks. And
sword fighting, yeah.
You know, he does these disguises, but now he's dressing up in drag, and he's doing this and that, and you've got Stephen Fry.
Yeah, we'll get to that. But you're right, this kind of is the original Sherlock Holmes amped up, and don't get me wrong, I like this movie, but I don't think it needed to be amped up any more than it was, and you really can't tell that I know this is coming from me, but when you start resorting to dressing in drag, you're starting to, it reeks of desperation. Now, don't get me, this is coming from me, okay? I've done this many times, but, you know, I don't think Sherlock Holmes needed this. You're right in that there was just so much more, and I think they were pushing it with the original, with, you know,
I thought the original had the formula down just about as good as you can get with everything, because they had a playful banter, but it never was so over the top that it was annoying, and at the same time you had the mystery, but it was interspersed with some decent action scenes, some good fighting scenes, and just, you know, everything. It had a lot of elements, but it gelled together well, where in this one it's a lot more action heavy, a lot more comedy heavy.
And that's where I just think, when I saw Sherlock Holmes, my initial opinion was, this really worked. But it wouldn't have worked as well if they'd have gone overboard. And this is where they go overboard. And again, I like this movie, but it is a distant second place. I hate to say that too, because I did walk away from this movie feeling pretty good. You know, I walked away going, yeah, that was cute, that was fun, it wasn't as good. And I really think if they're going to do any more of these, I don't think they will. But if they're going to do any more of these, they really should use the first one as a template for just how ridiculous we're willing to get, because there was some ridiculous shit went on in the first one, like the boat that was kind of crashing down, and you know, the big motherfucker and the taser. I was like, you know, they kind of went. There was enough. It was funny, but it wasn't outrageous. You know what I mean? So the first one had these great moments, like with the taser and the big fucking French guy, where they kind of had this little relationship where there was like, you know, it's like, just give me a minute. He's all beat up. He's like, give me a minute. And then the other guy gets beat up, and the big French guy's like, give me a minute. And then he goes, okay. So then they fight. You know, there was little moments like that where they kind of had moments, but it wasn't scenes. There were whole scenes that were built around, Robert Downey Jr.'s dressed in drag. This is funny, you know. And then the bromance is ramped up huge. To the point where they actually start ballroom dancing together. You actually had to go to the bathroom for that scene, but there's a scene where
I caught the tail end of it.
He, you know, Holmes is dancing with this gypsy woman, and then he's done dancing with her, and then he asks Watson to dance. You know, every time they talk about his Watson's wedding, he has this really pained look on his face, like, my boyfriend. It really is. Oh, did you have something to say? Oreo didn't go see it, but.
She's hyper because we left her alone and now we're back.
Yeah. So, I think from now on, you've gotten our general opinion. From here on, we descend into spoiler territory. just so you know, because there actually is not possible to talk about some of the stuff without descending in spoilers. First thing, from the trailer, you know that scene. That was the one moment in the trailer I kind of rolled my eyes at, where they bring back the line, get that out of my face. It's not in my face. It's in my hand. Get what's in your hand out of my face. That little line that was a callback from the first movie, not in the movie. That was in the trailer, but not in the movie. It's in the train, on the scene with the train where he's in drag and whatever. They cut that line, which I thought was unusual considering it was in the trailer. Anyway, this movie is about finally the whole conflict with Moriarty, which was in shadows in the first one, comes to a head. And where do I start with this? It starts with the wedding between Watson and Mrs. Watson. I can't remember her name. It starts with the scene with Rachel McAdams.
Yeah.
Where this scene bothered me a lot. Because, first off, Rachel McAdams is still ferrying packages from Moriarty. And Holmes is following her, and then there really is a fight sequence so obligatory they might have just had a big nameplate at the bottom saying obligatory first act fight sequence to establish Holmes as a badass. And then it so bothered me because, one, Rachel McAdams in these movies is terrible. Terrible. She is god-awful in these movies. Now, don't get me wrong, I even like Rachel McAdams. I've seen movies where she's really, really good. Do you ever see, I think she was in State of Play with Russell Crowe? Really good! But this character, I don't know if it's the character or her performance, she's terrible.
She doesn't have the charm as the other actors. Each one carries with them their own performance.
You know what it is? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, it's like Robert Downey Jr., he's a presence of his own, and Jude Law, he has his own thing, and everyone kind of carries that with them, but Rachel McAdams she's the bland one. She's
boring, and the reason is, I figured it out, I just figured it out just now. The reason is, the Rachel McAdams character is supposed to be this femme fatale, who's smart, she can kick ass, and she's dead sexy. She's supposed to be that character. And Rachel McAdams can't pull that off. She just comes across as bland. She doesn't come across as sexy in that really kind of dangerous sexy. She comes across as cute.
Yeah.
That's the difference. And so when she kind of has this flirtatious danger thing going on with Holmes, you're looking at her and go, babe, you can't pull it off. She can't. So it's a good thing, by the way, when they kill her off immediately.
Yeah, I think Guy Ritchie figured that out from the reviews of the first one, so he's like, we gotta write her out of this.
Moriarty kills her ass off. But
they got rid of her quicker than Jennifer in Back to the Future 2.
But there's another scene. Now, I liked Jennifer. They did dump her pretty quick. Anyway. This scene bothered me not only because she was bad in it, but because there was absolutely no reason for her character to still be working for Moriarty. Zero. Okay? We've established by now that Moriarty is bad news, and that Holmes and I can't remember her name.
Mary?
No.
What were you talking about?
The Rachel McAdams.
Rachel McAdams. Irene
Adler. Yeah. But we've established by now that he's not to be trusted, and that I think he's actually threatened her at gunpoint several times. So I don't understand why she wouldn't just disappear, because we've established she's good at this by now. I just don't know. And so it comes as a great shock to her when he poisons her to death. And so I'm like, fuck you, this is already really dumb, and I wasn't digging it. As for... then we have to get to... Basically, the entire first act is the train chase, where Moriarty sends his hitman to Holmes and tells Holmes that they want to meet. So they have this scene where Holmes and Moriarty meet, basically where they threaten each other. And so Moriarty tells Holmes in no uncertain terms that the hit is on for Watson. I don't know why he does this. He basically tells her, I'm going to kill Watson and his wife. And I don't know why he did that. Well, actually, it was like kind of Holmes brings it up where he's like, you realize now that Watson's married, he's kind of off the playing field because it's a game. And so Moriarty's like, no, I'm going to kill them. Yeah. I don't know, why wouldn't Moriarty just be like, yeah, sure.
Well, it kind of goes into a problem I had, which was it was both a positive and a negative because it starts off really slow, and I thought it gained a lot more momentum the longer it went on.
How could it start off slow? There was a huge fight scene at the beginning.
Well, because a lot of I realize there's action, but I'm talking about story-wise.
Okay.
Like in the beginning, we had to tie up loose ends. We had to get rid of Irene. We had to establish that Watson's getting married.
Which I thought was already really fucking established in the first
We
one.
go through the marriage. Then we have Moriarty threatening him. And then we had... whereas in the beginning, you had the... It was fairly early on, we had Lord Blackwell.
Blackwood, yeah.
Or Blackwood. Yeah. And we're immediately immersed into the mystery. In this one, it takes like a good 25 minutes before we're off on our adventure.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay. So, Holmes goes to save Watson from Moriarty's hitmen, of which he must have just like 24 in British officer uniforms and machine guns, because he does. But that's like this whole scene. And this is again where I really this movie started to lose me really early on. And I don't think it's because it was slow, it's because it kind of again, it takes what Holmes does in the first movie and ramps it up. It's to the point where Holmes doesn't really seem like he's brilliant. It comes across like he's fucking psychic. You know, like, he does that thing with the lipstick where he puts it in the machine gun so it jams the machine gun, and he jams something in the officer's rifle so he loads it with phosphorus so it explodes. Like, he saw all this kind of, he had this, it was almost like that movie with Nicolas Cage, Next, where he's able to see into the future. And it really does, there's him being smart, and then there's him seeing 10 minutes into the future.
Him reading the script.
Yeah, basically, him reading the script and knowing what's going on in the future. And, there is a movie in that somewhere, but it's not a Holmes movie. So there's scene where they're held at gunpoint, and he's like, be calm, and then the rifle explodes. He's like, I did that. And he's like, no, he goes, that was no accident. I did that because I'm Holmes. And so, it really bugged me.
But also, in what I say in that it starts off slowly, I didn't think that there was any mystery to this movie. It was a pure action movie. We're going from point A to point B to point C.
Yeah.
And whereas in the first one, we're trying to figure out how Blackwood got out of the grave, what he's planning on doing. It's a mystery, Sherlock Holmes. In this one, it's just like...
It's fairly obvious early on.
It's obvious what Moriarty's doing, and they're just trying to stop him.
Because it's obvious he's got some grand scheme, and they establish pretty early on there's a lot of intrigue with the French and German international tensions. So you're like, this must have something to do with the French and German international tensions because they're making the huge deal about it. With all these... So, like, even from the first act, Holmes doesn't exactly know what he's after, but he knows that Moriarty pretty much wants to start a war. And so from there, it's just kind of filling in the blanks.
So the whole detecting part of the story just gets pushed onto the back burner.
Yeah, and it's not so much a detective story as it is an action movie. And, again, it works here, but it's a much different movie. In that it's just louder and explosionier and that kind of thing. One plot hole that bothered me, I nudged you during this. Basically, at the end of the train shootout, half the train explodes, and so like they're all thrashed and they're sitting at the back of this blown out train, and the train just keeps moving. I'm like, what the fuck? This like the train blew in half, and the conductor like kind of looks back there, and was like, what the fuck was that? Oh well, and just keeps going.
British Rail Service.
The British Rail Service does not stop for nothing.
We're always on time.
Except for when they go on strike. But yeah, the British Rail Service, the conductor was like, "Oh, we're not on fire mostly. Yeah, carry on." And they just keep rolling. So that one was what bothered me. Now they do introduce a new, I don't want to say love interest, but new woman. In the form of the French gypsy. And that was another thing where they just kind of throw this out there. And I really found this funny, where Holmes goes to see this fortune teller because Moriarty has this fortune teller embroiled in his scheme somehow. And so he starts doing that thing where he's like, I'd like to read your fortune. And so he says, like, I have deduced that someone's here to kill you. And judging from the smell of tobacco and the smell of the flowers and the extraordinary stench of BO, there's an acrobatic Cossack hanging above us with a knife. Known for their extraordinary resilience and tendency to leap out of rafters with a sword. And I'm like, really? Well, you already hired an acrobatic Cossack ninja? He did. So they have this huge fight, and goddamn.
It's the woman is Numi Rapace. She's only done of note the girl with the dragon tattoo, the Swiss version. Mm-hmm. In this one, she does a fine job, although she's more of a plot point than a character.
She's fine. She's really just an excuse to get Holmes and Watson across the German border.
She's not a character.
She's
just, we need, like I said, it's a plot point more.
Yeah, she's just, she's of utility, but you could have taken her out and replaced her with a dude, and it would have been the same thing, like. So, I'm trying to think what else. To me, what bothered me about this movie was where it actually kind of removed a lot of the really good characters that I liked so well from the first movie. Like, Inspector Lestrade essentially has no lines, and he only shows up for like 5 seconds. And I really liked the rapport that Holmes and Lestrade had in that movie. I actually rather like Mrs. Watson. And she is almost not... She gets her ass kicked off the train, immediately.
The one good female character that matched well with Watson and Holmes, she's gone.
Well, ironically enough, she's a great straight character for Holmes. Like Watson is already kind of just rolling with whatever Holmes does. Watson, he just kind of has this, it's Holmes, because that's, Watson at this point has stopped trying to argue, I'm getting too old for this shit, leave me alone, Holmes. He just kind of, Holmes kind of just rocks into his house wearing the dress, and he's like, I've discovered an aboriginal toxin that paralyzes the vocal cords, and Watson's like, whatever.
Marty, we've got to save your kids.
Yeah, he's like, Watson is like, or Holmes is like, Watson, I've discovered the secret of time travel. and Watson's like, It's like, I believe we can avert a world war with my new missile. And I'm like, that's good. But Mrs. Watson is actually very, very... She still has this... She's still surprised by the things Holmes does. And so she's actually would have been really useful for, to have... Okay, Watson in the books is the stupid guy that Holmes has to explain everything to.
He's the proxy for the audience.
Yeah, he's not stupid. But in this one, Watson is actually... very, very intelligent. He's not as intelligent as Holmes, but he's still really on the ball. He's very good. So he almost doesn't have to have anything explained to him, if that makes sense. So there's no elementary My Dear Watson moments, where in this case, Mrs. Watson would have actually been a really good, how did you know that, Holmes? And Holmes is like, well, actually, ma'am, and it would have been really handy, I think. In many ways, that whole elementary My Dear Watson thing is solved just because most of his thought process is narrated, and they do that a lot. There's a lot of this Holmes vision.
That's another thing that's amped up, is the slow-mo and the Holmes vision.
There actually is this ramped, that 300 style ramping. Whenever Holmes starts to think about stuff, they have this thing where ramp real fast, then slow, and then ramp real fast, and then slow.
It's very Zack Snyder.
it's done very well, but again, there's too much of it. So where the scene, there's a scene where they go, well, how did you know the rifle will explode, Holmes? And he goes back in time, and then he shows how he put the lipstick in the thing, and the thing explodes, and then I'm like, okay.
The slow-mo worked when it usually doesn't in the first one, because, it was actually a pleasant new addition where it was Holmes actually making an intelligent fighter and showing us his processes and going through this. Here, it is like Zack Snyder movie where it's let's load the cannon.
Yeah. They did have some good moments. Guy Ritchie is very keen to have you're gonna be pounding this thing into the cannon, you're gonna be loading the cannon, I want you to have this big fucking stupid look on your face, hey! And then he is very good at using that, but he used it too much.
Yeah.
And again, we keep using the words too much in this review, and it's going to be a motif. And by the way, we finally meet Mycroft, Mycroft, by the way, is one of my favorite characters in the Holmes stories, just because he's you know, in many ways he's smarter than Sherlock Holmes, but he doesn't have the kind of ambition. You know, he's just kind of content to sit in a government job and jerk off. There's this. If you've seen the movie, you know the scene.
Stephen Fry.
Again, we just have a character who, for no reason, fucking strips down Starkers and just parades. And again, Mrs. Watson is just like, doesn't ask questions. She's just trying to avert her head.
I was actually loving the casting of Stephen Fry, and he delivered a good. I don't want to say hammy performance, but he certainly acted it up. But yeah, when you reach that scene, you just go, what the fuck were they thinking?
Well, I know what they were thinking. Honestly, I kind of applaud this thinking. Is they had a very boring exposition scene where they fished Mrs. Watson out of the lake, and they established that Holmes can send her telegrams. Like, that was something that needed to be done, and it was fine. But they had this very dry scene where otherwise Mrs. Watson receives a telegram and scene. So they're like, we need to do something stupid to make this scene not drag. So Stephen Fry fucking rocks out there naked. Why? Why not? I think okay. The one thing I would like to say is they do establish very early on, and they do this well, that Moriarty is a good match for Holmes. Because honestly, Holmes is on his heels for most of this movie, where like he's getting outsmarted by the guy, to the point where you start to find it a little ridiculous that Moriarty kind of threw all these red herrings his way, like basically inventing this whole fake scheme at the opera with the fake sign and stuff like that. It was like, really, you really expected Holmes to track all this, find the hidden wine cellar and the hidden secret door in the hidden wine cellar, and then interpret this to mean there was going to be an bomb at the opera. And I'm like, okay, you just got to roll it at some point because these guys are really, really smart.
But I think in the second half things were getting better, just because
it did.
It was getting. I don't want to use the term that's more darker in this, but it was at least shedding a lot more of its campy nature.
Yeah,
and the balance was coming back to it, where it was a lot more dramatic.
When it finally got down to business, it was really good. Another thing that bothered me, goddamn, I hate every movie that does this. The movie CPR scene. The live, damn it, live, where there's a moment where Holmes essentially stops breathing. And so Dr. Watson, because he stops breathing, doesn't check his pulse, just starts administering chest compressions. And I'm like, fuck you. I hate the live, damn it, live, pounding on the chest type of CPR. I hate it. Overused, fucking cliche. Ooh, I hate it. Terrible. But I do like they put over that Moriarty looks like is a sadistic bastard with the hook scene, which is actually kind of uncomfortable to watch. I rather like that. I liked Moriarty's hitman with the rifle.
And he does come off as being a match for Holmes.
Yeah. It's very good, although I told you this movie could have been over in 5 minutes. I actually thought about trying to find a way to do this movie in 5 seconds, where, like I said, there's a scene early on where Moriarty contacts Holmes and they meet. I was like, what if Holmes just rocked in his study and shot him in the face? It'd have been like, oh, Mr. Holmes, oh no! And then the credits roll. Would have saved himself a lot of trouble. It would have been, slightly illegal, but, whatever. So there was a really good scene, and they pretty much showcased this scene in the credits, maybe to the movie's detriment, because we saw pretty much everything that was really cool to see. The chase through the woods. Yeah. Where they're getting chased through the woods, essentially by the German army. And there's shit exploding, and it's all filmed in Zack Snyder vision. But it's done very, very well. It's really good. Probably better than Zack Snyder could have done it. But it was a really thrilling chase. Liked it a lot. And had that been the one major action scene in this movie, instead of having just been one of like many, would have been okay. So at the end, and this is big time spoilers. They finally, Moriarty and Holmes kind of have this face down in Switzerland to avert a major war, because Moriarty is planning to assassinate one of the prime ministers of a country.
I say, I believe we should play a game, Holmes.
So Holmes pulls Moriarty aside so they can play chess because it's a game of shadows. And I would be willing to bet you dollars to donuts if you took the game they play, move by move, and then match it. There's what's called like the perfect game of chess. I can't remember who was playing it, but
that's actually featured. It was the game in Blade Runner.
It was also I believe it was also the game in X-Men. I can't remember. Like the so-called perfect game of chess is the game in Blade Runner. That if you follow the move for move, it's widely considered to be like the best game of chess ever played. I believe it involves a queen sacrifice.
Yeah, it would sacrifice the queen, and it looks like the player is lost, but he uses trickery and minor pieces in order to get a checkmate.
Yeah. So I would be almost willing to bet you that the Holmes Moriarty the game Holmes Moriarty play is like this perfect game of chess. I'm throwing it out there. I don't know for sure. I don't study chess all that much, but yeah. The two big things that come out of this is it's discovered that Moriarty also has Holmes vision. You know where this is early on in the first Holmes movie where like he sees this guy creeping up and he goes into like his telepathic sense where he's planning out what he's gonna do, where he's like wild haymaker from the right, parry, block, shot the solar plexus, and then he's kind of planning out his moves like 10 steps ahead. So they do this thing where like it's pretty clear that Moriarty and Holmes are gonna throw down. And so we enter Holmes's head, and he's like, my advantage, his rage. His advantage, my injury to my shoulder. And so he's like, wild haymaker, parry and block and thrust and do this thing. And then we pan over to Moriarty, and he's like telepathically, he's communicating with Holmes, and he's like,
I'm in your ADR booth.
No, he's like, oh really, Holmes? You're not the only one who can play this game. And then he's like rabbit punch to the back of and so we all of a sudden enter Moriarty's thing where he's planning out his.
I say, this is my thing. Get out.
And then they start talking to each other, where he's like, they start planning out moves, and he goes like, odds of survival declining, and then I was like, this is brilliant. This scene should not have worked,
but it did.
It did. I'm watching this going, this is fucking terrible, and I love it. The fact that they're literally psychically dueling in their head because they can both see the future.
It's the one thing where they take from the first movie and amp it up to where it just comes back around on itself.
Yeah,
it's brilliant.
It was so fucking brilliant because I was like, they're literally dueling in their mind. It's like, if you ever see, there's a movie called Hero with Jet Li, and they do the same thing kind of, where like there's this, I think it's the first hitman is like, his name's like Wind or something like that, where they're fighting in like this, ironically enough, I believe it's like a chess lounge where there's like water everywhere, and they're playing checkers or chess or something like that, and so there's this old musician playing, and they stand there. They're about to throw down. They both got their swords out. And then they're like listening to the music because this guy's playing really good music and like the water is very peaceful. And so they close their eyes and then they play out the entire fight in their minds. And then they open their eyes and then they fight. And I'm like, of course this is these two are completely different movies, of course, but I was like, that scene was awesome in that movie. And then we kind of have the same thing in this. I was like, that's really cool. And again, should not have worked.
I thought the ending was great.
The ending was really good. But total cataclysmic spoilers. Turn back, ye who enter here. It's clear from their psychic duel that Moriarty is going to beat Holmes because Holmes his shoulder's all fucked up from before. And Moriarty is a Cambridge champion boxer, which they very firmly establish early in the movie that he knows his shit. So instead of fighting him, he just kind of grabs him and puts him in the cobra clutch and then pulls him off a cliff into the water. And so there's this very touching funeral scene, and Watson writes his biography. He basically writes the whole collection of Sherlock Holmes mysteries. And then it really sounds stupid now that you haven't seen the movie because, okay. So basically what happens is Holmes and Moriarty plummet off a cliff, and land in the rivers of Switzerland, and they both die. And then it happens that Watson gets a package, and it opens it up, and there's this little handheld oxygen tank that Mycroft had. They just roll with it. He had this little oxygen tank, and so he's like, Holmes is alive! Holmes is alive because he had an oxygen tank. And I'm like, okay, fine. How did he survive the 6,000-foot drop into the waters below? He's not that good. So I was like, okay, you've solved the problem of him breathing underwater. You didn't solve the problem of him dropping 2 fucking miles and shattering every bone in his body on the water. I don't know. That was just me. I was
mentioning that it's almost as flimsy as how Sherlock Holmes actually came back.
Yeah.
Because Doyle wanted him dead. He was so sick of Sherlock Holmes. He's like, this is final. There's no going back from this. He's fucking dead. You hear me? Dead. And a few years later, he's like, God damn it, I gotta write this shit again.
It's rather like what Douglas Adams did at the end of Mostly Harmless, a book I hated, by the way, where you can tell at the end Douglas Adams was really sick of those characters. You could just tell. But yeah, but what's funny was, even though I was kind of like, I called bullshit on the oxygen tank, I kind of didn't care. Just because I was like, you know what, fuck it, that was okay. And I just kind of left. Like,
with everything else in the movie, it's in the same tone. So,
yeah. So a difficult recommendation for me to make. I liked it. You know,
it's definitely a step down.
It's a step down, but I liked it. You know,
by the end, like I said, it was one that really had difficulty gaining momentum early on, but once it started by the halfway point, it actually got better and better and better by the end.
Yeah. I really would have liked it better if they'd included more of Inspector Lestrade and Mrs. Watson. I understand because of the plot they couldn't do that. But, you know, ironically enough, I still, even though the banter was still too goofy and too funny, I like the banter between Watson and Holmes. I liked Moriarty, and I liked his hitman. Moriarty was actually a very villainous presence. I liked them. And am I upset that I saw this movie? No. You know, I really like this movie. So, and I say that fully acknowledging its many flaws.
It's certainly not going to win new converts. If you hated the first one, you're really going to hate this one. Yeah, you're going to hate this one.
Yeah, like I said, difficult recommendation because I've spent pretty much this whole movie bitching about it. But in the end, I think it really comes down to just the charisma of the ensemble cast. You know, the fact the ensemble cast is that good, except for Rachel McAdams, that you kind of don't mind. Kind of like in the same way Star Trek kind of rolled on. we're like, you know, there was like, these movies aren't so good, but these guys, you can tell, are having a lot of fun. He kills the dog again. Dog gets better. Yeah, that's all I got. So yeah, there was a lot of movies coming out this week that I don't have time to go see. I would still like to see Mission Impossible, but I gotta get some editing done. I probably shouldn't have gone see this movie. I gotta get this shit done by Tuesday.
I'm going to be living at the movies for the next couple weeks.
There's like 4 movies you want to go see. You want to see fucking Tintin and Warhorse?
Yeah.
Schmaltz. I'm being curmudgeon-y. I'm not in the Christmas spirit. I admit that. But thanks for watching, guys. Any last words on Holmes?
No.
Okay, that's it for us. We're out.